Okay guys, so let's go ahead and get right into the upper control arm installation. Obviously by the title, this is a upper control arm slash ball joint replacement on a 2009 Chevy Silverado. I think this works through like 07 through 15 maybe, something close to that. But I got my A-arms, or my control arms from 1A Auto. So it comes in a pack like this. Go ahead and open that up. All right, so here's what it looks like. It does come with a cotter pin and a grease fitting to grease it. It comes with a new nut, which is nice. But yeah, and it has this little cap on there that you take off. It just protects the ball joint during shipping. But yeah, so here's the new one. I actually already did the other side just because I didn't really know what to expect. It didn't go bad. It went pretty good. There's what it looks like. Here's why I'm replacing it, because that ball joint is shot. But yeah, so let's go ahead and get started. I'll go ahead and jack the truck up and take the wheel off. All right, so I'll go ahead and show you guys what's going on in here. So this is the A-arm, obviously. I'm gonna start by removing, well, I'm gonna disconnect this bracket here, or this plug, and it's just held in by one of them plastic push pins. So I'm just gonna pry that off there, and then that'll unplug. And then you've got this here. I'm gonna take a screwdriver and open this up and pull this cable out and just let that cable rest. And then I am going to take a 10mm socket and take this bracket off that holds this brake line. So you just push on this little tab here, and that'll unplug. Alright, so I'll take a little flathead screwdriver and just kind of loosen this up. Take that tab open and pull that out. And just let that sit there. Alright, so now that that's disconnected, we are going to work on loosening this, I don't know if you can see it, this nut here that connects your ball joint. So I am going to go ahead and unthread this all the way and then thread it back on loosely. Last time I didn't unthread it all the way off, and when I separated the control arm from this bracket, the ball joint was just spinning, and I had a heck of a time getting this nut off. Now if that does happen, you can use an Allen wrench and put up in the bottom of this bolt. I'll have to double check on the size and hold this bolt in place while you loosen this nut. But let's go ahead and loosen that nut. Now I'm using a adjustable wrench, which isn't really the right tool because I'm low on tools since I just moved. That might be a 19 or 21 socket. I think it's 19. Actually, I'm getting ahead of myself here. I got ahead of myself a little bit there. Let's go ahead and remove this brake line bracket first, 10mm socket. Then that just pulls off and you let all the rust and crap go flying. Okay. Now let's go ahead and loosen that ball joint nut. Okay, so there's the nut I just took off. Now I'm going to thread it back on a couple of threads, just so when I pop this ball joint loose, or this control arm loose, the hub and everything just doesn't flop. So now I'm going to use a hammer and a pry bar and just try to beat this loose, and you'll see it kind of come up some. Alright guys, so my audio decided to take a crap on me and quit recording, so I'm going to attempt my first voiceover for this rest of this video. But anyway, I hate to be that guy, but I skipped ahead a little bit until I actually got this job done, but I ended up just taking a small sledge and beating the crap out of that control arm right where I just pointed, and eventually it popped up. I couldn't get it any other way, but I was just beating it real hard and it popped out. And you can see it where it's separated there, and it's flush against that nut on the bottom. So now we are going to go ahead and take that nut off, and the ball joint did start spinning there, so I am going to use an Allen wrench to shove up in the bottom of that bolt. It's got a hole for an Allen wrench. So I'm going to hold that I'm going to hold the bolt with the Allen wrench and use my crescent wrench to loosen the nut. Alright, so here we go. We get that nut off, and I'm going to go ahead and hold that whole rotor assembly as I take the control arm up out of there and just kind of sit that hub assembly off to the side there. So now that the ball joint is free, you can see that's why I'm replacing it, because that's so loose. You can tell that ball joint is absolutely shot. So now we're going to move on to these bolts. These are the last two bolts, and you see that they have those half moon shapes on the side of them. You're gonna just keep that in the back of your mind. But so those nuts on the side, we're gonna go ahead and take those nuts out. If you're not using an impact, you're gonna need to hold the inside with a wrench, and while you crank on the outside. I believe that's a 19 millimeter. Here I'm using a swivel and an impact with a socket and just cranking it out. So now that nut is off, I am going to go ahead and just tap that bolt out. And when you're removing the nut on the inside, you're going to have to kind of slide that half moon shape down the bolt so you can clear that spring right there, and just work it out. And then that other half moon shape on the side, I have no clue what those are called or what they're for, but Well, I mean, they just kind of keep that bolt from spinning, but you can remove the one that's kind of stuck on the outside. It's kind of stuck on a pin, but here you see me working that bolt out. So there is the bolt, and then I'll go ahead and take off the other piece right here, and that goes on, that bolt just like that, and it only goes on that one way. Well, it can be 180 out, so you want to make sure it's like that, and I just set it off to the side like that so I didn't lose those pieces. Alright, now I'm going to go ahead and tap out the other side. I took the knot off the same way with the impact, and I'm going to go ahead and work this bolt out here. So this side was actually easier than the passenger side, because on the passenger side that bolt head did not clear that shock, that spring in there. So I had to do a lot of prying to get that bolt head out of the interference of that shock. Now you can have a big pry bar or 2x4 and flex that shock some, or that spring some, because it barely interferes with it. But I just took a pry bar and put it on the head of the bolt and just cranked on it real hard, and it flexed past that spring. It is more difficult, but eventually I get it. Or eventually I got it. This side was a lot easier. So just keep that in mind for the passenger side. That's why I have that 2x4 laying there, is to pry on that spring, but luckily we didn't have to do it on this side. Alright, so now that those bolts are out, you can go ahead and pull out your control arm. It just slides out with a little bit of force. Watch your rust and crap go flying everywhere. So here's kind of a side-by-side comparison. It's the same exact part, just hopefully looks newer. Now I'm going to go ahead and take this nut off and take that shipping cap off. And then make sure you have your cotter pin and your grease fitting. Now we will go ahead and install this new control arm. Alright, so go ahead and slide your control arm in. It might look like it doesn't fit quite well, but just a little bit of force and a little bit of persuasion by the good old hammer, it'll go on in there. Alright, so now I'm going to take my bolts and put them back in. So make sure you have that half moon piece on the inside here, so you can slide it in from the inside hole, kind of persuade your control arm around so your holes line up, and then shove your bolt through. Now put the half moon piece back on the outside bolt, and that pinhole that you just saw goes in that pinhole there goes on that pin that's sticking out there. And it might not sit all the way flush, but I'll just use the nut to kind of pull that in. Just make sure it's in place before you crank your nut down. Alright, now let's go ahead and slide that nut on there. Get it nice and snug so nothing goes anywhere. You don't lose anything. I saw in a video they said that those half moon shapes the plastic pieces are gone when someone does an alignment, so you may or may not have them, but I honestly do not really know what they are, and some of you probably are judging me for that, but I really don't know. Alright, now let's go ahead and slide the other side in. Same way. Now on the inside there's a groove. I think I show after this, but there's a groove on that half moon shape that just goes around the pin. There's a pin on the inside too. It's not a hole, it's a groove, so it can be in multiple different spots. Now slide your bolt through. Now getting this in on the passenger side sucked because of that shock, that spring. I had to do a lot of prying on the bolt and a lot of prying on the spring with a second set of hands, and I busted the crap out of my knuckles. So it just you'll get it. It's just a little bit of hard work, but you'll get it. Same thing on this side. Align that pinhole with the pin before you put your nut on. Alright, now we'll go ahead and slide that nut on. Alright, so now that you have both of those secured, there's what the inside half moon shape looks like. So you've got that big groove instead of just a hole. And keep in mind that it faces up like that on both sides. So now we will go ahead and snug these up. Don't tighten them up yet because you want to place the control arm to be kind of at where it's going to be resting when the vehicle is sitting on the ground. So right now I'm just going to snug them up so I can still move the control arm, but not to where it's just flopping around like that. Alright, so the way I kind of judged on where to put this thing is I looked at the other side. Now there is some weight off of it because one side's jacked up and the other side's a little relieved. So if we go around here and look at the other control arm where that's kind of resting, you can see, come on, you can see that it's kind of down some, not all the way, but it's not straight out. It's a little down, so that's where I hold mine while I torque it down. Not all the way down, but just up a little bit. So about there is where I'm just going to kind of hold it while I tighten these bolts. So I believe the torque spec on this is around 100 foot-pounds, but I don't have a torque wrench at the moment, so I just gave it a couple good old-fashioned impact gun uggas to make sure that it's not going to go anywhere. So now that we have that tight, we are going to go ahead and put the ball joint back down into its hole. Best way to do this is to pry down on it. I actually had to have a little bit of help by my girlfriend to push down while I got that nut started in the bottom. It was a little difficult, but not too bad. So I'm going ahead and getting that started down there. I have a hammer in there for a spacer to press down on it more if you're wondering what that is. And there I got it started. Now I'm going to go ahead and tighten it and suck it down onto that bracket. This does have a torque spec, I think, of like 36 foot-pounds. Once again, I don't have a torque wrench and I couldn't fit a socket on that nut anyway. So I just kind of got it till it was a little tight. I mean, 30 foot-pounds is not much, so I got it to where it was a little good and snug, and then I lined up my cotter pin hole and pushed the cotter pin through. Alright, so there you can see the nut and the cotter pin been out right there. Alright, go ahead and thread your grease fitting on there. That is a 7/16 or something like that. Now go ahead and put your brake line bracket back on with your 10mm socket. And then your ABS cable, go ahead and reinstall it back in that little holder, and then push or plug it back in, don't forget that, and then push your little plastic push pin back through the hole that is on there. If it didn't break, if it did break, don't worry about it, because my passenger side was broke and just kind of sitting there. Alright, so there is your install. I wish I didn't have to do this voiceover because I kind of explained. Don't forget to grease your ball joint there so it lasts longer. And we'll go ahead and throw the tire back on now, the wheel and the tire. And I believe my audio picked back up, so here you go. Alright guys, so that is it for that job. Relatively easy install. Now, like I said, the passenger side took me a little longer because that bolt, you had to kind of get it out from the spring. But other than that, it actually worked out pretty well. So that concludes that. Now, remember, I'm going to be posting some fitness stuff, snowboarding stuff, hiking, mountain biking, hunting maybe. If you guys are into any of that type of stuff, stay tuned. I'll put a link in the description of probably my next video. I think that's it for now, but yeah, so stay tuned for more content on the Subaru and the rail buggy. Thanks for watching.